Once upon a time, in a small Italian coastal town, life moved slowly. It was as if the waves of the sea carried time itself. People went about their days with the relaxed pace of those who knew that life's greatest joys happened in slow motion. Among them lived Sophia, a young painter whose mornings were spent sketching the sunrise on the old pier that stretched out into the sea like an outstretched arm. Every day, Sophia woke with the sun. She would pull on one of her many colorful sweaters, grab her sketchbook and easel, and hurry down to the pier before the day's heat had a chance to set in. There, she would spend hours trying to capture the colors of the horizon, the way the light danced on the water, and the feeling of the salty wind on her skin. But no matter how many sketches she made, she always felt that something was missing. Her paintings were technically perfect, but they lacked the warmth of the sun, the depth of the sea, and the melody of the wind. One morning, as she sat painting, she noticed a man sitting at the end of the pier. He was an old man with a long white beard and sad eyes. He seemed so still and quiet that Sophia almost thought he was carved from stone. Yet there was something about him that drew her in. Every day, she would see him sitting there, lost in thought, as if the world had forgotten him. And every day, she would wonder who he was and what secrets he held. Then one morning, as Sophia approached the end of the pier, their eyes met. It was only for a moment, but in that instant, Sophia felt a connection with the old man as if their souls had known each other for lifetimes. She didn't know it then, but the old man had been waiting for her. Waiting for someone to break the silence that had settled around him like a shroud. His name was Luca, and he was a writer who had once been famous for his novels about the sea and the people who lived on it. But that was before the tragedy. Before the storm that had taken everything from him and left him adrift in a sea of grief. The sight of Sophia, with her bright eyes and infectious laughter, had stirred something within him, a flicker of life in the ashes of his heart. When she had first approached him, their conversation had been stilted, awkward, like the meeting of two ships in the night. But over time, their meetings became a daily ritual. And with each passing day, Luca found himself looking forward to her visits. In the beginning, he had barely acknowledged her, just a curt nod or a grunt in response to her cheerful greetings. But gradually, he began to open up to her, drawn to her warmth like a frozen soul touched by the sun. He told her about his books, about the stories that had once poured out of him onto the pages, and she listened with rapt attention, hanging on his every word. In turn, she shared her dreams of becoming a famous painter, of seeing her artwork displayed in galleries from Milan to New York. And Luca, despite his gruff exterior, couldn't help but be charmed by her enthusiasm. As the weeks turned into months, Luca found himself looking forward to their daily encounters. He would spend his days wandering the town searching for inspiration in the cobblestone streets and the weathered faces of the locals, and then he would hurry to the pier hoping to catch a glimpse of her setting up her easel. When he saw her, a smile would spread across his face, and he would settle down next to her, content to watch her work. One day, as they sat in companionable silence, Luca turned to Sophia and asked her why she kept coming to the pier. Why did she bother visiting a man who was as taciturn and gloomy as he was? Sophia looked at him, her eyes shining with understanding. "I come because," she said softly, "I feel like we were meant to meet here." Luca didn't understand her words, but he felt the truth in her voice. He, too, had felt that there was something between them, some invisible thread that bound them together. And so their days passed, filled with the simple pleasures of companionship. They talked about everything and nothing, and yet somehow their bond grew stronger with each passing day. Luca began to feel alive again, as if the years of grief and solitude had never happened. And he found himself falling in love with Sophia, with her passion and her dreams, with her ability to find beauty in every day. But there was a part of him that resisted, that refused to believe that he could ever be happy again. Every time he felt Sophia's fingers brush against his, or when he heard her laugh, he would run away, hiding from her as if afraid of his own feelings. He knew that he was in love with her, but he was also afraid of getting hurt. Afraid that if he let himself love her, he might also have to feel the pain of losing her. So, he would disappear for days, sometimes even weeks at a time, leaving Sophia waiting by the pier with a growing sense of unease. For a while, it seemed as if Luca would never choose her, that he would never allow himself to love again. But Sophia was patient. She understood that he needed time to heal, to come to terms with his past. And she waited, hoping that one day he would choose her. One night, a storm raged along the coast. The wind howled like a wounded animal, and the waves crashed against the pier, threatening to pull it apart. As the sky darkened and the rain began to pour, Sophia hurried to the pier, her heart pounding in her chest. She was worried about Luca. She knew that he liked to sit by the lighthouse during storms, and she was afraid that he might get hurt. When she arrived, she saw that he wasn't there. She called his name, her voice barely audible above the roar of the wind. Just as she was about to give up hope, she saw a flash of movement in the shadows. She rushed to him and found him sitting by the lighthouse, soaked to the bone, holding a worn-out notebook in his hands. As the storm raged around them, Luca opened the notebook and began to read. His voice was hoarse, but his words were clear. "My love, I still remember the day we met. I was so drawn to your eyes, the way they sparkled like the sea on a sunny day. I knew then that I had found someone special. I couldn't understand why I kept thinking of you even after you left." Sophia listened, her heart breaking as she realized that the letters were addressed to his fiancée, the one who had died before their time. She understood that he was still in love with her, that he had never stopped thinking about her. Suddenly, Luca looked up, his eyes filled with pain. "Why do I keep reliving the past?" he whispered. "Why can't I let her go?" Sophia knelt beside him, her hand resting on his shoulder. "You don't have to let her go," she said softly. "But maybe, just maybe, you can make room for me too." Luca stared at her, his eyes wide with surprise. He had never thought of it like that before. He had never allowed himself to believe that he could love again. As the storm continued to rage, Luca finally allowed himself to let go of the past. He closed the notebook, his hands shaking. He whispered, "I think I'm ready to move on." And in that moment, as the waves crashed around them and the wind screamed through the rigging of the boats, Luca knew that he had found someone who could help him heal, who could help him pick up the pieces of his broken heart. From that day forward, Luca began to write again, but his stories were different. They were filled with light and hope and the gentle presence of a woman who painted sunrises. And as the years passed, their love grew stronger, their bond unbreakable. They knew that they had found something rare and precious, a love that had been forged in the fires of adversity and tempered by the storms of life. And they vowed to cherish it every day, just as the sea cherishes the sun, just as the sky cherishes the clouds. For theirs was a love that would last forever, a love that had found its home on a small Italian pier where the sea met the sky.